Hello, welcome to our very first video on the LangChain4j framework. In this video, we are going to cover the basics of the framework and then we will develop a very simple chat-based application for interacting with the LLMs. Now, when it comes to the LangChain4j, this framework was designed with keeping one goal in mind, that is how we can simplify the integration of AI into the Java-based applications. Apart from this, there are few other common problems that this framework tries to solve. For example, when working with different AI providers, each of AI providers will have their own set of APIs as well as the SDK, and learning each of them will be quite difficult. This is where the LangChain4j help us by providing one common API, which means in order to integrate the different providers, we will only write our code once and we can easily switch between the different AI models without rewriting our code or without changing our business logic. Another thing is, when developing the full-fledged AI based application, there are many problems which we may have to deal with. For example, we may have to think of how we can integrate the memory into our application, how we can work with MCP and so on. This is where the LangChain provides the built-in support for all of these common features. So the entire framework is divided into different modules and we can easily integrate the required modules based on our requirements. Another notable feature is the strong community and the framework support. So if we have to learn the LangChain4j, then we already have the plenty of working examples. Apart from this, we can easily integrate this framework with Core Java, Spring Boot and many other frameworks like Micronaut, Helidon and so on. And when it comes to the community, it is quite active and many new AI features are being integrated into the framework with a very rapid pace. Now let's understand what is the difference between LangChain framework versus LangChain4j framework. So both of these framework help us to build the AI powered application, but they are designed for different programming language and the ecosystem. So when it comes to LangChain framework, it is originally created for the Python and the JavaScript developers. It has a very large ecosystem and wide adoption. When it comes to the LangChain4j, it is inspired from the original LangChain framework, but it is not a direct port of the Python or the JS version of the framework. So it is built from scratch for the Java ecosystem and it is a community driven and the open source project. When it comes to the LangChain4j, it can be easily integrated with the existing framework like Spring Boot, Quarkus, Micronaut and so on. Now when it comes to developing our application using LangChain4j framework, we have two sets of APIs available. First one is the low level APIs and the next one is the high level APIs. When it comes to the low level APIs, in this case we are going to work with the low level components. Also it provides us the more control how we want to integrate these components together. So in this case we may have to write some more code in order to glue these components together. But when it comes to the high level APIs, it hides away most of the complexity and developer can focus more on the business logic. So high level APIs simplified how we can integrate different AI capabilities by making use of the simple interfaces as well as the annotations. You can think of them just like the Spring Data JPA, wherein we will only define the interfaces, but the implementation for these interfaces will be provided by the framework behind the scenes. Now when it comes to developing our first application using LangChain4j, we are going to create a very simple chat based application having one REST endpoint. So using this endpoint, user can send the message to the LLM. LLM will process this message behind the scenes and give us the response. Now when it comes to our project structure, this is how it will look like. Basically we are going to create the Spring Boot based application within which we will integrate the LangChain4j. So the name of our application is LangChain4j Getting Started Demo. At the very top we have the Spring Boot main class. Then we have the controller package containing chat controller class. Now inside this class we are going to create a REST endpoint which will accept the request from the user, send it to the LLM, and once we receive the response from the LLM, this controller will send the response back to the end user. Then we have the DTO package containing the request and response classes. Then we have the application.yml containing basic configuration related to our application. Also inside this file, we are going to define the configuration for our LLM. Then we have the pom.xml containing configuration related to our project. Now let's go through our Spring Boot project, starting with the pom.xml. At the very top, you will notice we are making use of Spring Boot version 3.5.9. For Java, we are making use of version 21. And for LangChain4j, we are making use of version 1.10.0, which is the latest stable version available at the time of recording this video. Now coming to the dependencies section, first we have added the Spring Boot starter web dependency. This will help us to create the REST APIs. Then we have added the LangChain4j OpenAI Spring Boot starter dependency. So this will bring all the dependencies that are required for working with the LangChain4j framework. And we have added the dependencies specific to the OpenAI. So using this, we can integrate the OpenAI models within our application. And if you are working with the any other providers like Anthropic or Google Gemini, then you can add the dependencies that are specific to these providers. Now when it comes to this OpenAI dependency, for our demo purpose, we are going to work with the free models that are offered by the OpenRouter platform, and the models that are provided by them are compatible with the OpenAI standard. That is why we have added the OpenAI dependency. Then inside the dependencies management section, we have added the dependency for the LangChain4j BOM. Now this particular BOM is useful to avoid the version conflict. When it comes to the LangChain4j, it has many different modules that work together behind the scenes. So in order to avoid the conflicts, we have added the LangChain4j BOM, and here we have specified the LangChain4j version. Now coming to the application YML, at the very top we have defined the name of our application. Then for LangChain4j, we have specified the different configurations. For example, since we are going to work with the models that are compatible with the OpenAI standard, here we have specified the properties related to the OpenAI. And then inside the chat model, we have defined the base URL. In our case, it is going to be the base URL of the OpenRouter platform. Then we have specified the API key. This will come from the environment variable. So we need to specify our OpenRouter API key under this environment variable. And when it comes to the model, we are going to work with the free model that is offered by the OpenRouter platform. In our case, we will be working with the DeepSeek R1 model. So here you will see it is the free model that is available. And for our demo purpose, we have set the log request and log response parameters to true. So this is useful for understanding what is happening behind the scenes. So this will help during the development phase. Now coming to our Spring Boot main class, this is the standard Spring Boot main class which will bootstrap our application. Now coming to our controller package, we have one controller named as chat controller. Inside this controller, we are going to create a REST endpoint that can be utilized by the end user in order to interact with the LLM. So at the very top, we have defined the base path for our endpoint, which is /API/v1. Then in order to create a REST endpoint, we have defined this method named as chat. We have annotated this method with the annotation @post mapping, inside which we have defined the path suffix for our endpoint, which is /chat. And in order to accept the request from the user, we have created this Java record with name chat request. Inside this Java record, we have one field named as message. So the message that is sent by the end user will be mapped here. And once our request has been processed by the LLM, we will send the response back to the user, for which we have created one Java record named as chat response. This Java record has one field named as message. So the output that is given by the LLM will be mapped here and it will be sent back to the user. Now coming back to our controller, once we have received this request, we need to send this request to the LLM. So when it comes to the LangChain4j, in order to interact with the LLM, we have one low level component present with name as ChatModel. So if we open this ChatModel, here you will see it is present inside the LangChain4j package. And in order to interact with the LLM, we can make use of this method named as chat, which accepts the string kind of message and also produce the output in the form of string. So we can utilize this method in order to interact with the LLM. Now this particular chat model will be injected inside our controller with the help of constructor injection. So once we have the chat model, we can simply use that in order to interact with the LLM. So here you will see we are making use of the chat model, then we are calling the .chat method. Inside this chat method, we need to pass the message in the form of string. So here we are extracting the message from the request, sending it to the LLM, and once we have received the response from the LLM, we are mapping it here. So the output produced by the LLM is also of type string, which will be stored here. And once we have the string message, we are simply wrapping it inside our Java record, which is chat response, and sending it back to the user. So this is how we can create a very basic chat application with the help of LangChain4j. Now in order to test our endpoint, we need to start our application. But before we start our application, we need to set our OpenRouter API key under this variable, which is OpenRouter underscore API underscore key. So I have already set it. So I'll quickly start our application. So our application is started. We can simply test it with the help of REST endpoint that we have created. Now in order to test our REST endpoint, we need to send the post request to this particular endpoint /API/v1/chat. And inside the request body, we can specify the message for interacting with the LLM. So I have just given one sample message here. Can you briefly tell me how you can help me? So once we will send the request will be processed by the DeepSeek model. And once the request has been processed, we should see the JSON response here. So yeah, our request has been processed, and inside the message field, here you will see the response that we received from the LLM. Earlier in our application.yml, we set the two flags to true for logging request and response. So this is how they are useful. If we expand our application logs, here you will see what request was sent to the LLM and what response was received. So at the very top, you will see the HTTP request containing details about the request that was sent to the LLM. So the request is being sent to the OpenRouter platform. The model name is mentioned here. Also the content which was sent by the user via Postman is mentioned here. And once the response was processed successfully, this is how we are getting the logs. The response was successful, so we are noticing 200 OK. And when it comes to the response body, here the overall response that was received from the LLM is mentioned here. Also, since we are making use of the DeepSeek version R1, behind the scenes it also performs the reasoning. So here you will see the reasoning performed by the LLM model is also shown here. Also the total tokens that were utilized for processing this request are also mentioned here. So this is how these two flags are useful for logging request and response during the development phase. Yeah, so that was all regarding the basics of the LangChain4j framework, how we can integrate it inside our Spring Boot based application, and how we can create a very basic chat based application with the help of this framework. Also, the example that was discussed during this tutorial is uploaded on GitHub. You can simply check out the code, set your API key and test the same. Yeah, so that was all from my end. I hope you found it useful. Thank you.